The word from the Lord, and it is found in Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. Listen for the word of the Lord. Now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have all the people give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the people will go up, everyone straight in. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have all the people give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the people will go up, every man, every person straight in." For a few moments, I like to use as a subject, what will you do after the walls come down? What will you do after the walls come down? Joshua is a story of conquest and fulfillment for the people of God. It is in this book that we see the Israelites receive something God promised them many, many, many years ago. After many years of slavery in Egypt and 40 years wandering in the wilderness, the Israelites were finally allowed to enter the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey, the land God had promised years ago to their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Over the years, God had done some amazing things for them. God had parted the Red Sea for them. God had provided manna from on high for them. And now they were headed to the land God had promised to them. God had proven to them time and time again that He is faithful and He keeps His promises. They get to the promised land only to find a gigantic wall all around the city of Jericho, the first city they are to conquer. If they didn't get past this wall, they couldn't conquer this city or any other city for that matter. The wall around Jericho was massive and considered to be unconquerable, which means the things on the other side of the wall would be unattainable if the Israelites could not get past the wall. This wall stood in their way and threatened to block their blessings from on high. They were between a rock and a hard place. Turning back meant going back through the Red Sea and back into the wilderness. Going forward meant facing the insurmountable wall and then facing the battle that would be fought in Jericho once the walls came down. They were in between a rock and a hard place. When you are going through a difficult situation and find yourself up against a wall and you don't know how you're going to get through, sometimes it's good to think back and remember a difficult situation that you went through in the past and how God brought you through that one. This remembrance gives you a little more confidence and a little more assurance, because if the Lord brought you through that, hallelujah, surely He can bring you through this. Remembering should have been easy for the Israelites to do, because God led them to victory against insurmountable odds on many, many occasions. They survived 400 years in Egypt. Moses delivered them from their captivity in Egypt. God parted the Red Sea for them and kept them for 40 years in the wilderness. Now the battle of Jericho is at hand. And I must say, the battle of Jericho is interesting to me, because if God had already promised the land and everything in it to them, why is this called a battle in the first place? You don't have to fight for something that's already been given to you. The battle at Jericho also didn't seem like much of a physical battle at all, because it was already won before the fight began. God had promised the land to them, so we know the land would be theirs, because God is faithful and keeps his promises. And according to Rahab, the people of Jericho were already scared to death of the Israelites, because they knew about all that God had already done for them. The land was already promised to them. The opponents were already scared to death of them. All they had to do was reach out and take hold of it. They defeated the enemy before they even showed up for the battle. So what was the purpose of the wall? The gigantic wall that was supposed to be unconquerable, especially since the land on the other side of it was already promised to them. The wall around Jericho was designed to make it very difficult for anyone to attack the city. If the land had already been promised to them, why was there a giant wall around it, making it difficult for them to get in? God promised them the land, then put a giant wall around there to make it difficult for them to get in. I believe this was a spiritual battle to be fought, a battle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Think about it. God promised the land to them, but first they had to get past a wall that is considered to be unconquerable. God did not set them up for failure. That's not the kind of God we serve. The fight of your life, ladies, will be the walls that you put up yourself, the perceived walls that you have convinced yourself are present, or the walls that the enemy puts before you as a stumbling block to keep you from receiving your blessing. We have walls that we put up ourselves. We have perceived walls that we have convinced ourselves are in our way. And then we have walls the enemy puts before us as stumbling blocks to keep us from receiving our blessings. God gave them instructions to conquer this wall. They followed the instructions to the T, and the wall came tumbling down. God said, march around the city every day for 6 days, and on the seventh day, march around the city 7 times. And after you have done that, and you know, I want to pause here and say, when you're preparing to preach, you read the text, you read the text, you read the text over and over and over and over again. And as I'm reading this, you know, God said, march around the city every day for 6 days, and on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times. After you've done that, sound the trumpet, make a great shout. You read this enough and you think, okay, and then after you march around again, march on one leg, and after you march around again, hold one hand up and wave it. It really, after you read it enough times, it sounds really crazy. You know, we saw somebody marching around the church with a trumpet, counting how many times, and then they shout, a loud shout all at the same time, and they don't do anything. We don't know, you know, we might call you know, we don't know what's wrong with them. All right, so God told them to do that, and then he said, and the walls will come down. They did everything God commanded them to do, and Joshua 6:20 says, when the trumpet sounded, the people shouted, and the wall collapsed. No human hand even touched those walls, but still the walls that were in their way came tumbling down. The city of Jericho should have been invincible, but still the walls in their way came tumbling down, because no city wall, no matter how strong or mighty, could withstand the power of God. This was a spiritual battle. They were fighting a psychological warfare intended to do just what it did to the people of Jericho, because it created panic and confusion. The battle had not even begun, and their opponents were already defeated because they were scared to death. Sometimes we need to humble ourselves and seek out the kind of power that only comes from God to tear down our walls.